And here we go with our second segment of the day, Foam Data Services presenting Cosmetic and internal mods. This first half hour will be with BiggsNZ, all the way from the other side of the world, and I will let Tom do the rest of the talking as we join him now from his rustic studio in lovely, lovely Devon.
And good afternoon. It's now officially past 12 o'clock. So here we are. We've got Big Al here from Monkeytron Collective, and we've got BiggsNZ all the way from New Zealand, who stayed up really, really stupendously late and is actually a time traveller from tomorrow. So if you want to hear what the lottery numbers are for tomorrow, he's your man. I'm going to hand over to Big Al, who's going to explain what's in the segment. So thank you very much for tuning in, and let's get rocking.
Hello there. Big Al from Monkeytron Collective here. This segment we're going to be talking cosmetic mods and well, mainly cosmetic mods with myself and Biggs from BiggsNZ over in New Zealand. If you follow Monkeytron Collective, you'll know we mainly do cosmetic work, painting, hydrodip, props, cosplay stuff. It's our main thing, main passion within the hobby. And Biggs does some slightly different stuff with his custom resin castle work. Do you want to tell us what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I take physical parts and I resin cast them, predominantly Nerf parts, a lot of sort of fun and glow in the dark parts, all the way through to glitter parts, through to translucent parts. So yeah, as well as mods. So I do a few mods, but obviously being a bit time poor, I kind of got to pick one or the other. So I enjoy really enjoy casting resin parts for the community.
Now, if you'd like to just give, not everybody, I mean, obviously there are people who may have been in a hole for the last 2 years and are not familiar with your parts, but how did you get started in making resin parts for Nerf? Because suddenly it went from no BiggsNZ to like, oh my God, look at all this BiggsNZ stuff. It felt like
so it all came from this this lovely blaster here, where I did a Raven mod and I wanted some orange parts to make it so it was black, orange, and very cohesive, and there wasn't this horrible yellow or lime green. So in the process of doing so, I got some parts, and I figured that it was something I really enjoyed because I followed a lot of tested.com and those sort of crew. So I kind of knew how to do it. And because I didn't have Imperial drill bits Imperial drill bits, I couldn't drill the hole in the part correctly, and I drew it misaligned, and then so I destroyed the part, and I thought there's got to be a better way. So I just decided, well, if there's not a better way out there, why don't you create the better way? So I just decided to start up a shop. It just started obviously by casting for my own needs, and once I realized that it's a logical enough thing, I'm a logical guy, so I put two and two together, and now I've got a resin shop. And it's one of those things where I just take so much pride in sort of seeing other people's work that it's quite cool because I get to put those parts in other blasters. I can only build so many, but I get to see all, like, in essence, my little babies out there. So it's quite nice.
Yeah, and that's really sparked an interest in a whole load of new areas where the hobby had stagnated a little bit because people who didn't necessarily have access to the parts that you've got or didn't have those skills that you had were struggling with things like lighting, and they were struggling with things like a kind of different look to things. And it kind of kicked the whole aesthetic in a new direction. So I've got to say thank you on behalf of all the hobby builders out there, because that did make a big difference. And how did you get into the resin side of things? Did you have a resin casting interest from somewhere else, or?
It was literally just a whole lot of watching Tester.com, Punish Props, all those guys. I'm one of those people that I can't sit still. I have I'm a functional consultant, so IT jobs, the last thing I want to do when I get home is touch a computer. So it's because it's very physical and practical, and I'm a detail-oriented guy. It was just one of those things, and you're kind of right, and I have never stopped learning. So the latest thing I've been working on at the moment is polished parts. And I tell you what, going up to 5,000 grit sandpaper, taking 40 odd hours to do so, and polishing it's my new baby. So I think being in this hobby, that you never sit still, you never lie on your merits. You're always constantly trying to improve, trying to evolve. And my biggest objection or struggle is time. So if that's my biggest problem, then life's pretty good.
Yeah, and that I think is one of the things that everybody struggles with the hobby. And actually, the availability of all these new parts has really helped people who are time poor to be more creative. Because I know people complain. I'm quite an old school modder, and my view was always, hey, if you can't build it, don't use it. Do you know what I mean? I'm like you. I'm a hands-on guy, and I'd rather, if I didn't make it myself, I was very tight about putting other people's stuff into blasters because I want to do my own. But I think that for those people who are more time poor and maybe, if you're just getting into the hobby, the availability of this stuff has really meant that you can produce a blaster that looks amazing and kind of fulfills all your wildest fantasies about, the kind of big build stuff that we've seen over the last few years. And it's very, very approachable. So I think that's a real bonus to having so many people come in.
Yeah, totally agree. And yeah, being able to see those blasters out there, and I was lucky enough to go to Ragnar Oktoberfest last year. Because down here in New Zealand, we've got Frankenzilla, Slater, and Flood. But outside of that, we're a pretty small community. So yeah, my favorite thing was going over to America and just seeing these blasters, and people spend so much time. Like Tyler, for example, he matched his outfit to his blaster, and he came up to me, brought a swordfish with my internal parts, with LED kits, wearing matching clothes. And to me, that was cool, isn't it? That's just amazing.
Yeah, and I think that kind of inspiration, that two-way inspiration, is a really good thing about being a maker in this hobby, that the stuff that people do with the ideas that you have. And, obviously Hydra Dip is one of those things where it kind of evolved on its own and gathered its own momentum. And if you kind of combine that with these newer clear parts, the wider range of cosmetic parts available from 3D printers and from, even now parts suppliers. I mean, obviously, Al, you do a whole load of different work. If you'd like to just give people a little bit of background, we've heard from Biggs, and then obviously we'll bring you back in, Biggs, in a minute.
Yeah, so just I've actually got some Biggs parts here in my swordfish that he sent to me last year or year before. So yeah, this was the world's first Hydra Dip swordfish, and it's got the kind of green parts in it. It's got the clear muzzle on it, but we've got the green internal parts and this that there. I'm kind of like Tom as well. I kind of like to do things old school and make them myself, rather than using kind of bought parts. I'd rather be using bits and bobs out of my workshop and putting things together. But when you've got parts of the quality of Biggs that are kind of in these amazingly vivid colours and stuff, there's just no way I could reproduce them. So it's good to support people that buy these things. But yeah, as I said, kind of main interest in the hobby is cosmetics. I would spend all day in my workshop painting blasters, and it's kind of the main thing we do. I just spend my spare time painting blasters. That's one of the reasons we kind of started going to the comic conventions and stuff, is because I had painted all these things and nothing to do with them. So take them to
obviously we've heard about how Biggs kind of got into making his resin parts, and he got into that through the prop side of things and through watching other makers and just having an interest in making things. And then Nerf kind of happened to be the thing that he wanted to make, and therefore he made parts for Nerf. Now, how did you get into the building and the painting and the kind of construction side of the hobby?
As I've been a toy collector all my life, and like to tinker and paint stuff. I used to do a bit of miniature painting, nothing to the extent of some of the guys in the hobby that do, but always enjoyed that kind of artistic side of it. And then got into Nerf through the kids about 12 years ago. They were buying blasters, started having amazing fun in the house, playing about with these blasters. I was then thought, I want to get my own blaster. So I started Googling what blasters to buy and discovered the Nerf hobby. And it was just the perfect storm of, it was collecting toys, it was tinkering with things, it was being artistic. It just ticked all the boxes for me, and I just kind of jumped in. Also involved in doing some cosplay, and we like to do cosplay and go to the Comic Cons and stuff, and kind of got into painting some cosplay stuff, and kind of just snowballed from there. And then the likes of finding Tom, your work, Tom, the Hydra Dip stuff and the paint stuff in the early days, it was just blew my mind. I was like, wow, this is the kind of stuff I want to get into.
Yeah, and I think that it's been, I think everybody who's involved in the hobby, it's not just those people who are kind of taking part in this. I think there's a huge number of people, we as makers, we might be the kind of, some of us may, consider ourselves to be big name makers. And we always hear from big name makers with big price tags on their stuff. But actually, we can't do what we do without looking at other people's stuff. And I think one of the great things about, I know we're all stuck here and we can't go and shoot each other with darts, but actually, it's really good time to kind of share those things. So if you have a skill or something that you're good at, now is a really good time to share it with the community. If you've been doing a build and you've been taking photographs, you've been hoarding that skill, please write it up and put it places like BritNerf, like the Facebook groups, if you must use those, and those kinds of places where you can go back and you can pass that skill on. Because I think one of the things that I learned was I came into this from a kind of a hot rod background. I wasn't really a Nerf player, and I was actually looking for something for work. We needed to get young people active, and I'd investigated lots of other tagging sports, and they were really expensive. And we just spent a vast sum of money bringing in laser tag, and I was like, hey, I could run this much better with something cheap. And obviously, I had kids too, and my kids are a similar age to Al's kids, and we kind of just ended up looking at what we had available and went and used that, and that kind of drew me into the Nerf stuff. And then I realized very quickly that the sort of level of paint that was acceptable, even the top tier painters in this, I just looked at the materials they were using. And in fact, if you can see behind me on this shelf here, in a minute, I'll get it down and I'll talk to you guys about progression. Up there is the first blaster I ever painted is up there. And I did that as a test of kind of the techniques. So we're going to go into a bit more kind of show and tell stuff next. But I'll go and grab some couple of bits whilst Biggs is talking, because I'm going to ask him a question in a second. So I came into it, looked at this stuff, and I kind of went, well, that doesn't look that great. And obviously I had access to a professional shop because I'm fortunate, well, a very dirty shop. If anyone's seen my shop videos, you'll know it's more a glorified barn. It does not some kind of like antiseptically clean, awesome kind of maker lab. It's more like a dumping ground with the tools in. So I'm going to ask Biggs, how did you get into the Nerf side of things specifically? Because obviously your first build's quite advanced build. Most people would look at that and go, oh, I wish I could do an integration that clean. It might take the rest of us 6 months to get there. What got you into the Nerf stuff itself?
Awesome. Well, it's a very funny story. I got into this very late in the game. I got into it when the Recon came out. I'd left school or at this stage, and I'd asked my parents, sadly enough, because I have a child's brain, which is awesome. But I asked my parents if they could buy me this Recon because it was modular, you could add on, you could take off. And they kind of laughed at me and said, no, you're a bit old for Nerf guns. So I just turned around to my best mate and said, yo, you're buying it for me. Here's where you buy it. Here's the cash. Just give it to me as a present. That way I can justify owning it. And then I found one of Drax's, old mods from the Dawn days, and I took to my Recon. That was technically the first one. This one's actually the second one. And I took out the dart tooth, and at the time I just thought I'd drilled it out wrong, so I'd singled it. So that blaster, I took the bottom off, and now that's a singled Recon because it turns out it was a simple dart tooth, and if I just put that back in, life would be simple. And then moving on, it was just really admiring a lot of your work and like the work out there that people were doing. And so when it came to an integration, it was just one of those things where you commit to it. So I just committed to it. I put in the number of hours sanding it, and I'm still not happy with it. I'm tempted at this stage to resand it back off and to make those lines even smoother. So I think that's another thing is you stay in this hobby because you're never quite satisfied with that last job. You always want to do better at that next job.
Yeah, and that kind of going back over old jobs is such a temptation, isn't it? You look at things, you progress, and you think, oh, damn it, I wish I'd known about that when I started. Or when I did that job, I didn't know that technique. And I think the community's been really good about sharing those techniques. So I can share mine now, and then I'll ask Al whether he's got some stuff there. Al, have you got anything from your progression period, or are you only got new stuff?
No, I've got my very first Hydro Dipped blaster here.
Brilliant. Well, I'll come to you for the Hydro Dip segment then, and we can talk about how that started. So I've got here, it's nice, new black. Look, there's people. This is just for Bobo, nice and black. And I thought I'd paint these orange parts out because they're just too light. So this has also got LEDs in it and stuff inside because this was before you could get clear parts. And what this is I looked at Coop's painting video, and obviously back in the day, Coop and Drac were kind of the big guys for mod videos. You didn't really have a very, very massive choice. You had people like Nerfenstein who were doing props, and you had some great prop builders that you could look at. But I watched Coop's How to Paint Nerf tutorial, and I kind of thought to myself, hey, I wonder whether that'll work. And I found some black vinyl dye because I've used vinyl dye before in the hot rod stuff. Use it for recoating seats and things and plastic parts. And, if you've got grungy grey bumpers and stuff like that, or you want to black your grill out on the cheap. So these are, this is just a Strife. This was at the time, it was a real high power build because it had IMR batteries and was rewired. And this is the first one that I made. So I looked at this. I kind of used it a few times. I played with it a few times. I still play with it occasionally just because it's there. And then I thought to myself, hey, look, this is kind of lame. And when you look at it now next to the next stuff, so that brings us on to the kind of Hydrodip stuff. And the way that evolved was I got asked, in fact, I offered to do a little job for Iona, who's the seamstress at Blastersmiths. And Iona had been making me some nice custom tactical gear. Boff there was there at the time, and he'd been designing some. And Iona said to me, I said to them, well, look, you've helped me out, I'll help you out. Iona sent me a shell, and she sent me a long strike, which is called Tsubaki, and that's actually around somewhere. There's pictures of it somewhere on my website. And that was just a long strike shell. And I looked at the shape of the shell, and I looked at the kind of way I was going to do things, and I went into my paint cupboard. I'm lucky my shop is behind. The guy behind me is a bodywork guy, and he basically lets me run through all his old cans. So he might have done a blow-in on somebody's car, and he'll have like a quarter can. So I go over there every couple of weeks and dig through his quarter cans, and then I'll go and pick a couple of colours, and sometimes I'll custom mix those. So a lot of my paint ends up being an individual mix because I'll mix it out of several cans of base, and I'll just tint the shade to what I want. So I started with that blaster, and I splayed that. I think it was a mix based on Mars Red, which is an old colour from the 90s, which used to be a real hot colour for like custom VWs and custom Porsches. And I used a bit of Mars Red, and then I also had a little bit of pearl lacquer that I had some pearl mica, and I put the mica pearl into the lacquer, and I shot the clear lacquer with the pearl in. And I put a bit too much on the first side, so when you look at it, you get this kind of dazzling gold over the top of the red. And the dip stuff, the way that started was my very first blaster that I built, that kind of first primary, was the Rapid Strike that later became the Reaper. Now, that was one we got early. And I went to a guy locally and said to him, hey, look, I was thinking, it would be cool if it was wrapped in carbon fiber. I have a carbon fiber blaster. And I went to the wrap guy. I said to him, hey, look, can you wrap this shell? And he was like, nah, too many dents, too complicated. If I try and vinyl wrap that, it will end up not sticking and it will all crease. And he said, what you should do is go and talk to this guy around the corner who does Hydrodip. And I'd like, heard of that. And I went over to the Hydrodip guy, and he showed me some of his work, and he was like, yeah, it'll be £200 for you to get the shell dipped. And I was like, okay, bye. I went and looked at the cost of the stuff online. Now, obviously, those of you not familiar with Hydrodip, it started back in the 70s in Detroit. It was a way for Americans to have woody cars inside without having trees in them. So basically, Detroit came up with this method of, it's called water transfer printing. And you float the transfer film on the surface of water using the surface tension. You spray it with an activator which jellifies the film, and then you push the part through it, and the positive pressure from the water wraps the part and basically changes the texture of the part by putting the transfer around the part using just the water pressure. So they did that to make parts for Cadillacs and for Buicks and all those kind of, those big barge cars of the 70s America, those ones that you can't fit even in a British driveway, that you can't get into a standard parking space. And those they used them on. So I looked at the dip, and then I did that shell for Tsubaki, and then the Rapid Strike thing kind of came around, and obviously we kind of got as far as here, which is the Reaper Rapid Strike. Now, when this came, I'd kind of done the shell, and you guys have seen this before many times. So this is a Mars Red base, and then the Reaper Skulls dip, which gave it its name. I put a little bit of metallic in the Mars Red to make it a custom, so it had a little bit of a bling to it because I didn't want to buy it. So that's just Mars Red with pearl mix. And then I left all the plastic red because I wanted to use all the plastic orange because I wanted to actually use it for game. And this one went to BSUK because at the time we were looking for something unusual to do, and they were working a lot on Arduino. This is the Arduino controller box here on the bottom, which is 3D printed, and that was the first 3D printed part that I used in any build, was that box for the Arduino, and which has since been swapped. I think this is a J's 3D one, and that might have just been a piece of plastic originally. So this was the first Rapid Strike in the UK. This one of the really first ones. We bought a whole batch about 4 months. So that's how that came about. And then the dip thing kind of took off. I got to say a thank you to Duke Wintermore in the States for promoting the dip stuff. He did quite a lot early. And Al saw the dip video and he did some dip. So Al, over to
you. So as you said, I'd been following work for a while, and the Hydrodip stuff came out, and I remember speaking to you way back in the about it, and I think obviously you'd been doing it, and I think a couple of maybe Newport Norfolk had done a couple of dips, and wasn't too many dips about, and this was my first kind of attempt at a Hydrodip. This is my Tam O'Shanter Strife, Did this for the very first Battle of Britain back in 2017. And kind of taking Tom's advice, he kind of said, don't just take a blaster, dip it straight in, and that's it. Kind of layer it up, use different layers, use different base coats, kind of make the dip pop a bit more, make it a bit more attractive. Obviously, a lot of the dips kind of just go onto a white background, and it just shows the colour through that's in the film itself. But you can use different base coats and stuff to make it pop and get different effects. So I went with a candy green base on this with a kind of tartan hydro dip, being from Scotland, and I was the only Scottish Norther going down to the Battle of Britain that year, so I bought myself a kilt, and I thought I'm going to have a tartan blaster to go with my kilt. And I kind of did this, and this was the first hydro dip blaster I did. The clear coat on it is not held up too well, but I've just decided to leave it that way, and every scrape and scratch it gets, I colour in with a silver pen. So it looks very battle damaged. So this has been to many Britain events. This also went all the way through Endor 2018. One of the Monkeytron Juniors Brigade, he used it as his sidearm at Endor 2018. So it went all the way through Endor as well. So it's seen a lot of action, and it's had a few different sets of internals in its time. It's just got fairly basic ones now because I don't really. I tend to use my swordfish a bit more now. Yeah, this kind of progressed. I love the swordfish shells over the strife. I just love the big chunky aesthetics of them. Pardon me. They're brilliant for hydro dipping. I've done loads of hydro dipped swordfish. So we also have this one. This is the Power Flower. The Power Flower swordfish. These are full of LEDs as well, so they light up. No batteries in them, but don't want to deafen you all. We've also got some Biggs parts of this, but they've just not been got around to getting them fitted yet. We've also done a nice Galaxy hydro dip one on the clear swordfish. This hex dip one as well. These are all going to get the LED stuff when they're finished. But we were quite lucky as well when Worker brought out the clear Hurricanes. They actually contacted us, and they'd seen what we'd done with the swordfish, and they contacted us and said, we're bringing out a clear Hurricane. Do you fancy hydro dipping something? And we were quite amazed and thought, yeah, totally, send us a couple, we'll get them done. So we ended up doing these. I didn't want to do a tartan one, just because it'd be like saying, so I went with a kind of cryptic dip with the kind of green tint. I did a base kind of green tint on it, and then did cryptic, and then Mel did one for herself as well with the flowers to match her swordfish. So these were the world's first clear Hurricanes that came out, and we did these up, and they were quite good. They kind of shared our stuff the kind of launch for these, which was amazing. It was really tough to have been invited to do that.
Awesome. Yeah, and I have a very similar story for learning myself how to hydro dip. Was watching a video online, and I thought, oh, this again, one of those things of this. Oh, I've got to give this a go. But I think this is sort of one of those stories that people that live far enough away from a large city will sort of understand the pain. Trying to get activated down here in New Zealand when you can't ship aerosol cans, or you can't get aerosol cans easily from America. So I actually found a local seller who was actually hydro dipping shotguns and shotgun grips. And so I approached him and asked him if I could just buy some direct from him. And then I realized that it was in liquid form, and I had to figure out how to electrolyze it to a small enough particle. So then I ended up getting a fence gun, which you use to paint fence, to put the activator in so that I could in essence, find enough filter to be able to activate the film. And hence I got myself a little pink $100 bill blaster, and it's as you can see, it's I forget which one it is, but that's the one. And I personally love that because it was one of those ones where I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time and effort painting, but I wanted to sort of make a nice little plaster for a friend of mine. So I just thought simple. And I think sort of having all these online tutorials is it really is a godsend. I think even in the situation we're at now, the fact that we can learn new skills while we're stuck inside, and that there's just such a massive community. And I think also being close by, with Big Al being able to ask you, Tom, he was able to advise you, able to give him advice around making sure you pop it. Whereas, as you can see, one color, no popping. So sometimes experience is just also about being there and actually attending wars and getting advice face to face.
Yeah, we're very lucky that obviously in the UK we have the Britner Forum, and before Facebook was a big modern community, the Britner Forum was it, and Al was very sensible in local games forum stuff, and I think that the forum probably helped us quite a lot. At that point, we were kind of leading everything, because our community just happened to really collaborate well together, and it's really difficult when you're on the edge of things. You know, you obviously down there, you had to make your own kind of community. If you've still got now, what's the New Zealand community like? Is there a modern community there now?
Okay. So I'm super lucky. I relocated from Auckland down to Christchurch here in New Zealand, and there is the most amazing modding community. Definitely want to shout out Slater, Frankenzilla, and Unscrupulous Mod, Flood, I know him as. But I've got to put a shout out to those guys because we actually have a really tight community down here now. We've got Quick Flags New Zealand. Slater is doing an amazing job running that like a madman. We rock up, it's there ready to go. He's just an amazing man. So yeah, I'm super thankful. We have monthly mod nights now down here with 4 of us, sometimes 5 and 6. It's really, really good having an online community to start with, and then being able to physically actually also have a game that I can go to. It was amazing.
Yeah, because without games, you can't show all this great stuff off, and that's where I've really struggled with the Reaper. It's had all the money and effort put into it, and then it's been used about half a dozen times because my local that I run is 100 FP, and I can't get it under that limit. So I think we kind of looked at a little bit of each person's individual stuff there. Obviously, all of our stuff's available online. You can go look at our albums and the YouTubes. I've got to say, Unscrupulous Modifier, he's a top guy. He makes nice stuff, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's amazing. In person, he's just a lovely person. I can't speak highly enough about him.
So we're about 30 seconds out from our next ad break. Has anybody got anything they want to chat and say before we wrap up?
Somebody had quickly asked, is Biggs ever planning doing on a resin shell?
Short answer, 3D printed blaster, probably. Hasbro blaster, no.
So potentially a 3D printed resin shell version of something if you can get the licensing. You've got the skill to cast that now.
Yep, and I'm talking to someone as we speak, but if anyone else is out there, please talk to me. I don't have enough people talking to me about licenses, and I love doing it.
Okay, so there you go. If you want to have Biggs, one of the best casters currently doing Nerf work, cast you a clear shell or a shell of your printed blaster, please get hold of him. So we're going to go straight over to the commercial break now, and then on to the next.
Next on FoamFest Live, we have 2 guests from Germany joining Tom to talk more about cosmetic and internal mods. And I'll hand you over to Tom in the studio.
Hi there, and welcome back. We're into the next segment, and I'm going to introduce my co-hosts here, and we're going to get to talking to them about the kind of work that they do. And I'm here with Lowrhine Mechanical Artworks.
Hi there.
And SirScorp.
Hello.
And they are broadcasting from their workshop spaces, and they've got lots of their work to show you. So if I just go to Lowrhine Mechanical Artworks first, if you'd just like to give people a flavour of the kind of work you do and what got you into this hobby, and then we'll do the same for SirScorp, and then we can get into a bit more depth.
I just got into this hobby like 8 years ago because my older sister gave me a stripe just as a joke for Christmas. That is how I started this hobby, and it was really boring after some days. So I opened it up and just looked what to do. And after that, painting and cosmetic mods and integrations, I mostly do all that stuff. At the moment, I'm a bit more into tournament blasters for competitive nerf or things like that. And yeah, that's my way of the hobby.
And obviously, Strife's real bad gateway blaster. Anyone who's had a stock Strife, that is something that is going to motivate you to mod because they're so bad. Yeah. The first day, it's like, oh, this is so good, and then okay. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I always love battery-powered toys. That's the reason why I choose Strife.
Yes, and this, in fact, that's the first thing that I flywheeled. And in fact, I had to phone up Boff when he worked at BS UK to ask him how to get the flywheels off this thing without breaking them. So there's a freebie. Right, so Scorp, how did you get started and what kind of stuff do you make?
Hey, well, I got started with the lab aspect of life, and I needed some black blasters for lab. And started with that about 10 years ago. And pretty fast, I became attached to the German community called Blasted, which is also a forum and still going strong. And I'm started from there. But then some years ago, the lab that I actually wanted to attend died out because the people organizing it didn't get a good place for what they planned to do. And then everything just went away. So I have now probably lab stuff worth thousands and more euros that I don't use. But I wanted to grow into the hobby more and just acquired more blasters and started loving long shots and started modding long shots. And now I'm very, very active modding, blogging, making a lot of tutorials in German because we have a lot of great content in English, but not so much in German. And so I start to focus on entry-level stuff in German to get the people into the hobby, to get the people know the words they need to understand the English part of the hobby and stuff like that. And it just escalated a bit.
Yeah, now long shots, of course, are the Springer version of the Strife in terms of being a gateway blaster, in that they're so awful stock, you've really got something about them to potential. And I think that that's a really important point, that those people who maybe, America is what a while ago was still the biggest nerf modding community. And if you're a young person in other countries, the gateway to modding was English. And I think that doing that work of kind of translating and writing and doing those basic tutorials into your own language is something that could be really important. Anybody who's in a country where they want to grow their nerf, if you make those basic tutorials, what can I put into my Strife? How do I do a spring swap in an EAT? How do I do, simple rewiring? What parts do I need? What terminology do I need to learn? What are the common international terminology for all the parts? So when I buy parts off a foreign language website, how do I get those parts to be the right parts? And would you say that that was a successful approach? Have you seen growth in the younger community?
Yes. I would say that was actually a quite big success. I working now for 1 year for Blaster Parts as a blogger, which is my part-time job, or was my part-time job, because my contract ran out right to the Corona time, and I don't know if we can get another one or a new one. So I actually made money out of it. That was pretty nice. And I got more people, and we are, like I said, the forum is still strong, and we still got new members every day. And on the other hand, we get new events actually in Germany. And that's something that really started in the last years, that we really got sporting nerf events. And I think it was like 2 or 3 events in whole Germany, like 3 years ago. And we really, we were on a very good way, but now everything stopped, of course. Yes. But I really hope that we will have a lot of events later this year or next year, if it's possible again.
And hopefully those people who are stuck inside now while it's paused, they can use this as an opportunity to extend their modding knowledge and maybe explore avenues of the hobby that they didn't know about before. Now, obviously, those people who may not be familiar with the German LARP scene, the German LARP scene has been really big, hasn't it? I mean, some of your LARPs are in excess of 500 players.
Yeah. A lot of people are post-apocalyptic LARPers or zombie LARPs. These are quite small for the big German LARPs, but still about 500 people. The fantasy LARP scene in Germany is really big, and they got events up to 10,000 people.
Yeah. And
so we have a lot of LARPers.
Yeah, and do some of those events allow blasters, those really big 10,000, or most of those just...
No, the big ones are normally fantasy LARP, so no blasters. But post-apocalyptic and zombie LARP are most of the time are dart blaster LARPs, because airsoft LARP is quite complicated in Germany.
Yeah,
and
also the equipment can be off-putting. Some people don't like it because it's very difficult to do LARP without iPro if you're doing airsoft LARP, isn't it? A lot of LARPers like to have the makeup is part of the LARP, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course you can do a lot of amazing stuff with dart blasters.
Yeah. Now, Lowrhine Mechanical Artworks, obviously competitive nerf. So tell us how that scene has evolved in your country and across Europe. It's starting to get bigger in Europe generally, but how did that come about in Germany?
I have to say first that it's really difficult to get all these parts and for higher FPS blasters in Germany, and the shipping to Germany is difficult because of customs and all these things. So I think I founded the first competitive Nerf team, but it's not only competitive, it's just for our German events. I want to start a team like I saw it in Britain last year as the Tropicana Thunder and X team, and I like it a lot. And so I think we should start it here. I thought we should start it here in Germany too, and that's why I did.
So you were inspired by some of those other more fun but also competitive focused teams where there's that openness of the hobby and that kind of joining together aspect.
Yes.
And how many people are there in your team now?
Right now we are 6, I think. We got SirScorp.
Yay!
Myself, we got Raoul from Fette Wurstwerfer. We got Milan from Devil's Nerf.
Oh, yeah, so Milan's a talented maker in his own right, isn't he, too?
Yeah. And we've got 2 of our friends from the forum, from the German forum community, BMAC and I think Surf. They are into 3D printed blasters, and BMAC, of course, is a very good blowgun data. It's crazy. And so the team
is just deadly.
Yes, they're really, really horrendous, aren't they? People who maybe not familiar with a blowgun, it's basically just a tuned length piece of plastic tubing or whatever tubing you like with a mouthpiece, and the art in being a blowgunner is your lung capacity, and actually how you shoot them is down to your physical ability, really, as well as the construction and the correct dart tuning length of the blowgun. And they're particularly devastating because they're very quiet and they can get ridiculous ranges, can't they?
Yes, it's awesome. And the performance is crazy. And as you say, you can't hear them. So you don't know where it came from. So,
and as long as you don't get out of breath, virtually total mechanical reliability.
Sorry?
As long as you can keep the breath going, you've got total mechanical reliability. There's nothing to break.
Yes, of course.
Which is another big bonus, isn't it?
Yes. So I think we all became, the German community is a lot of this, we all became friends. And this is we did this team to hang out, have a good time, and do what everybody else is doing in this hobby.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key message, that actually if you want to progress in the hobby, and it's true in other hobbies too, but I think particularly in Nerf, the real thing you've got to focus on is not min-maxing and trying to go for all-out performance, but actually think about the social and the fun side of it, and that you Nerf you means that you can approach it in your own unique way. You know, we've got some blowgunners, and people laugh at them until they've been shot from behind a bush from 60 feet without ever hearing them. But that kind of stuff, you know, is would you say that to anyone who's thinking about starting, that they should look at the fun and friendship aspect of it as much as anything else?
It's the most important thing. So it's not all, you see all these high powered, high FPS blaster monsters all around, but I live really near to the Dutch border, so I join in the DNC, the Dutch Nerf community battles sometimes, and I often got shot by even by a Jolt or a Triad, and I'm using an FDL, my FDL. So it doesn't matter what's your blaster. It's just take part.
And I think that's a really important message. Obviously, we're focused on modding because we're hobbyists and we like to mod things. But actually, if your resources are really limited, you don't need to have a top-end, fully painted dip with all the internal mods. No. And I mean, SirScorp, if I could come back to you, if you've got one blaster that epitomizes your approach to the hobby, I can see you've got a substantial rack there. If you had one blaster and somebody said to you, what's the one blaster that showcases your approach to the hobby, what would you show them?
That would be my personal long shot, which is in a never-ending whip state. So we got the very, very expensive trigger guard, original from just forgot the name, Singapore, metal, expensive. Explorer. We got an artifact kit with some worker parts because some artifact parts broke. We got half a 3D printed top rail with a metal Picatinny rail attached to it to hold it together. We've got the internal pump grip with the reverse bolt sled and with the wood and 12mm aluminium bar handle. And that's my long shot.
And that obviously reflects a continuing and ongoing evolutionary process. And that as things break or that you find new parts that you like, they go on there, and the shell is just an old friend.
Yeah, that was one of the first long shots I ever painted, and I painted it black with a lot of bad paint, without primer, without sanding, just flat black. And then I started sanding it off when I started to actually become better at the hobby, and that's why it looks this shell-shade effect, I think.
But it's because part of the story of that blaster, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually just sanded it off to be able to paint it. There's still the plan to paint this at some point, maybe.
But this blaster is an icon in our community. Every one of us knows this blaster.
Exactly, and you can't paint it now because actually it's not about the paint on that blaster. You'll have to paint something else. You're stuck with it how it is.
Maybe I will paint it, but maybe I'll just paint them before.
Yeah, it looks like you've got quite a lot of work there sitting in your rack. So, Lowrhine, if you were going to take one blaster that you kind of showed and symbolised your approach to the hobby, which one would you show people?
I've got two. I think I've got two. I've got my first integration. It was really realistic looking. This was where I started with integrations. It's I don't know if you can see it. So
yeah, we can see.
It's a demolisher, the main blaster with Alpha Hawk front end and stock. So this was my first integration ever. That is how I started getting deeper into this painting techniques and things like that. After the first integration, I started hydro dipping. So this is my first hydro dip ever. It was the cheapest film, so I chose this. And the integration of the grip. So that is how I started into this hobby, getting to, I think a lot of you know my rifle Kronos.
Yes.
With the sling fire, the stock needs to be painted again. These are the things I do now.
You need to wood grain. You need to wood grain that stock using wood grain dip film, and If you're a
Yes.
real grain meister, you have to have the grain wrap and match along the top so it looks like it's 2 machine pieces. That is so
Yeah.
hard on that stock. It's a very hard stock to wrap that.
Yeah, I think so. But I use this blaster in single shot rounds. It's converted to short darts, but it's a bit boring to shoot at once. So I made another Kronos master key to change. So this is my favorite blaster. I got a lot of questions if I would sell it, but it's not for sale yet.
So that just gives you variety and fun in the hobby, which is, and gets you to play in games.
Yes.
Which shows a lot of things that you like. So, I mean, for me, probably, I'm guessing, really, most people expect the Reaper to be kind of there. And in development terms, it's the blaster it's the first full auto that I did. It was one of the first rapid strikes to be done in the world. And it's quite famous because it was very, very early. America didn't even have the rapid strike released. We found a website that listed them by mistake, and everyone was waiting for it. It was super hype about it. And Raja, which Track recently sold for $1,000, those of you that might have missed that, that actually is the very first one to have ever received a 3D printed trigger grip and all the internal microswitch. And that was the first 110 FPS rapid strike in the world. There wasn't one before. So that one was the very first. But I think probably the one that I would be most proud of I had to go get it down, is probably going to be my URP, my Ultimate Rapid Pistol, because this was the first one where everything came together in one blaster. And obviously, I had some help with this. This was a collaboration where, as I was building it, they were designing the parts for it. And obviously, it kind of, I was making it a little bit shorter. It had the very first, I've got to say a big shout to Bo Bololo for inventing the idea of the Rapid Pistol. And they're tremendous fun to play because they're so short. And in those days, we didn't have short full auto. And obviously, BSUK actually were designing the kit and trialing the kit as we were making the blaster. So it was very interesting to do. And that kind of kickstarted a whole lot of people making them. What's really been fun about this is seeing all the other ones that have been made. Where, like you say, people ask about selling it, and I have promised it to somebody who's borrowed it off me before. If I do ever sell it, then I'm going to give it to somebody who's going to play with it because it doesn't come out. So we had a quick question. So the Kronos Master Key, Lowrhine, this is from Zombona. Hi, buddy. The Kronos Master Key. What did you do about the hop up in the upside down Kronos? Did you take it out so that the ball doesn't have back?
I always took out all the hop-ups in the Kronos. I think they work better when using the balls. But some people say some shorten them, just make them shorter. But I remove them completely in every of my rival rounds blasters. But most of my Kronos are shooting short darts right now, like this one. So behind in the picture, this is my own personal. I should say tournament loadout.
Yes.
I changed all of my blasters are changed to a kind of Joker theme with green paint. So this is my personal Kronos, Talon MagFed. So all of my blasters look like this, and I don't use. I think I'm only using short darts at the moment. So I got this. This is my mostly used tournament blaster. So I've got it printed in my colors, and the hydraulic on the stock is even the same.
Nice. I like that Joker film. It's a good film.
Yeah. And even my face mask is the same. I painted this face mask so everyone should recognize where the blaster belongs to.
Oh, that's really neat. I like that a lot. Was that airbrush?
No, I just spray painted it and do some dry brushing techniques, so it's no airbrush.
Yeah, because I do a lot of, when I do weathering blasters, I do all of those with brushes. And I own an airbrush, and I can do airbrush if I need to. So I've got one more question, and then Scorp. We had a question that had been asked. We've got, have I ever dipped a Generous or Cassinandor? Yes, I have. It's on my album somewhere. I did one for a good friend of mine in America, and I did a what was it? It was a honeycomb type dip over a silver base. They're quite hard shell to dip. If you're dipping one of those, there's a lot of protrusions and lots of little bits. They're quite big. So SirScorp, what have you got there? That looks interesting already.
That's something I made in the last 30 hours, I guess. Because like Lowrhine just said, he got his own paint theme, and that's my paint theme. It's painted wood. I'm not sure if you can see that very good. So hand painted and not hydro dip, and it's also painted snake skin, I call it.
Did you use the tights method for the snake skin?
Yeah, and I actually have the tie to remove from this blaster right now and light.
Explain to people
because
how
a lot of people
works.
Yeah, that's like that's one of the things a lot of people recognize me for, because I was the first person at Blasted who used tights for painting blasters, and it's very easy. You just prime the blaster with an underlaying color. For me, it's always a dark green, sometimes a bit metallic, sometimes a bit higher, something like that, so that the blasters are not all the same but matching. And then you cover it after letting it dry for a very long time, because if you're not letting the paint dry completely, you will rip off the paint underneath the fishnet tight. And you put the fishnet tight over it, and as close as possible. I sometimes, like here, I sew that together so that it really is there.
And you use the elasticity of the tight to go to pull it in.
Exactly.
Right.
You could, of course, use other methods. I have actually seen people using the plastic bag that potatoes are sold in, but that's not as elastic. And I prefer the tights because they are elastic. And then you just paint it with the colors you want, and then you can reveal it, and you have the scales. And I cannot reveal further right now because I have to.
If you hold still there, we can see the scaling really clearly in that green. So you've gone with a lighter color over a darker color, or a darker color over a lighter color.
I've gone with 3 lighter colors over the darker color. So I start with the same color to fill in the gaps between the tight and the primed coat. And then after I have the first layer on top of the tights with the same color as the blaster was underneath, I start with lighter green and some gold on top normally. And then I maybe go back and do a little bit of the darker tone beneath, because I like to have a fade effect. I like the dark at the bottom and the very bright golden on top.
And that's actually a form of shading, and we use that a lot in custom car work, those fade shades to do things. And that's also an old custom trick that they used to use for doing snakeskin, and that's very ably demonstrated. Is there a write-up on blasted.de for your technique?
Yeah.
Okay, so if anyone wants to find it, then they should search blasted.de, and if you need to pop it in the chat there, in our general chat anytime, and people can get it. Now, you've got wood there too.
Yeah, genau. I'm my blasters, like some of the in the background, are always wood paint, the green scale, and the rest is black. So everything that does not go well with the scales or does not match the wood paint goes black, because I can't put another effect on it to not overbook it.
Yeah, and that's another really important thing, isn't it? If you have a theme, try and keep the theme kind of tied tight and don't get distracted by something else. You can evolve your theme, or you can change your theme entirely, but on one blaster, there's a limit to how much people will see visually.
Yeah, exactly. And it always also, if you want to have a theme that you can do on a lot of blasters, it's a pain in the ass if you have to get another thing under, and you never want to do that.
Yeah, and obviously you end up with a lot of mask layers. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up. I want to say thank you very much to Lowrhine, and thank you very much to SirScorp for their perspective on things. And you guys are really, really visible. If you want to be found, you're on all the usual platforms, is that so?
Yeah, Facebook, Instagram.
And if you're in Germany and you want to get some real good German and English content and some real hardcore help, do go to blasted.de. It's the German Nerf haven, and it is amazing. If you've not been, go. Okay, so we're just going to remind people very quickly not to forget about the raffle. There's still a good chance of humiliating Boff and Tom just a jolt, and also forgetting things. Lowrhine, have you got anything you want to add before we wrap?
So, as SirScorp said, you can reach me on Instagram for all of your questions around Blaster hobby. I plan to do some workshops in my new maker space. So stay tuned, and maybe if you are live next to me in Germany, maybe the Netherlands, join in. It will be I will shout it out on Instagram, and everyone is invited to join.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to have to wrap there, so we're going to go to the ad break. Now a word from our sponsors. Don't forget, get on the raffle.
And now on FoamFest Live, we go back to Tom in the studio, where he is joined by Flywheel the World and Spectre N7. So over to you, Tom.
And a little bit of a stand-up, because I haven't had one. And we are into our next segment. So we have now transported ourselves from the wilds of German LARP and Blasted DE, and we are now live with Spectre N7 and Flywheel the World. And we're going to be continuing a talk about modding generally. And obviously we've done the cosmetic stuff. We've looked at some dip. We've looked at some intro 3D printed stuff. We've looked at themes. We've had a few tips on paint. But Spectre and Flywheel the World have their own unique take on things. So if I can go to you, Flywheel the World, what did you start in the hobby, and what is your primary focus? You know, what really floats your boat?
So I started in the hobby with a box of N-Strike stuff that I picked up to try and play with my kid who just bought a regulator, and found out very quickly that even against a stock regulator, N-Strike stuff just wasn't going to cut it. So I ended up, my very first mod, I took a Vulcan and I shoved a barricade cage in it, and I grafted a long shot stock on the back end of it. And ever since then, I've been flywheels and stuff that never had flywheels.
And obviously that flywheeling those N-Strike flywheel things has kind of led to a whole resurgence of all those old blasters that you ended up with by default because they're what you could find. And people have now started actively using them again because you suddenly made them all competitive.
That's, was never intended, or never had any idea that it would go as big or as far as it has. I just liked the recon and wanted it to shoot like a Strife.
Yeah, and now it does, which is quite astonishing. I've got a couple of recons that I use for games, and at some point I've got a set of your wheels and your cage designs that's due to me, and I keep meaning to do something with them. It's another one of those things that's been on the back burner. Now, where do you see things going? Obviously, you've got some stuff happening. We'll come back in a minute. We'll do future stuff next.
Yep.
So I'm just going to go across to Spectre N7. There's another UK modder, and I know you do some commission work. So, Spectre, if you can just tell us how you kind of got into the hobby and what you're doing with your current stuff.
So, I kind of got into the hobby thanks to Foam Thunder. They're a Glasgow-based Nerf events company. I mostly got into it through their kind of terminal infection kind of stuff. My background initially was much like the Germans earlier, through LARP. I'd been painting props and stuff, and then a couple of my friends from LARP were like, there's this zombie thing happening in Edinburgh, it's absolutely your bag, you should come along and do that. And it kind of snowballed from there.
And was that terminal infection?
Yeah, that was the very first terminal infection, the very first HVZ style event in a shopping mall. And I mean, that's how I met Drac, that's how I met Project FDL, that's how I kind of got dropped into the community at the deep end almost. And I think, one of the things that you talked about a lot is how the community empowers people to move forward. I now have a workshop in my house. I have all of these blasters on the wall behind me. And 3 years ago, Nerf was something that I played with when I was 10.
Right. So that was all stuff that you kind of got. That's all kind of stuff that you got just from playing games primarily.
Yeah, primarily. I mean, I kind of got into the hobby and was like, well, my stock Strife, which I rocked up with, much like Adrian, you know, when you compare a stock Strife to anything that's been even lightly modified, you just get wrecked. And so I was like, okay, so how do I'm a naturally quite a competitive person. Anyone who has played with me or played against me will know that. And there's an element of, you know, I don't want to be overpowering things, but I don't want to feel like I'm getting the wrong end of the stick either. So continually sort of improving on from there. I mean, it started with the kind of basic motors and flywheels upgrades. I'm like, well, now I've upgraded the insides. I want to make the outsides look pretty. And there's an American nerfer called TK1138, and he does all of his blasters and all of his loadouts based around the sort of Star Wars Stormtrooper theme. And I am a massive Mass Effect nerd. So I was like, well, I like that. I think that's a good thing to kind of build a persona almost and theme everything around it. So all of my blasters have this kind of red and black theme. They have the N7 logo. They all have a somewhat sci-fi aesthetic. And I've kind of gone from there, as it were.
Okay, and you've kind of built on that, and you've developed your own brand now. I'm just going to go back to FTW. Obviously, you've given us a little idea of how you got into it, the way a lot of us got into it, by being wrecked by people with better stuff, or by having games with our kids and going, God, some of these are really bad. We want to do something about that. So where are you at now, and kind of what are you looking to do in future, and what stuff are you particularly proud of?
Okay, so obviously I'm very proud of the Recon, because that's, or in this case, if I get it around here, that one's a Retaliator. I went to say Regulator. I'm like, no, that's not right. So that looks just like a stock Retaliator, but inside that's got flywheels. I don't have a battery in that one just yet because I just grabbed it off the wall. But yeah, I'm very proud of that because that's sort of what started the whole thing. And not far into that, I started playing around with solenoids because I was finding that the auto gearboxes just kept breaking on me. And now we've got our own line of solenoids. We've got the flywheels. We've got motors coming very soon, specifically designed around the needs of our flywheels, because at the moment there isn't a motor on the market that's been specifically developed for the needs of micro flywheels. Honey badgers.
Yeah,
I love you so much, man. I love you so much to hear that.
You've saved the honey badger from certain extinction.
Yes. So the honey badger until now has been the best option in terms of reliability when overvolted on 3S. But we've actually got a motor that we've been working on that is specified for the RPM that we need and the torque that we need at 3S in a 130 form factor.
So if anybody's not familiar with how the FTW wheels, one of the key factors about the FTW wheels, which ironically have been adopted in a similar style by the Worker Hurricane and other things, is that the FTW wheels are actually a smaller diameter than the usual Nerf flywheels that we inherited from Hasbro. And that produces a unique set of changing kind of requirements. And if you look at how tiny those are, they are a micro wheel, aren't they? And they need to spin faster.
Yeah, where technically a Hurricane wheel would be a mini wheel in that terminology.
Yes.
FTW are a micro. Do you have a Hurricane wheel there at all, Spectre? I don't have any in stock at all.
Yeah, because a Hurricane wheel is around
right here.
Yeah, it's about 25 millimeters, isn't it?
Yeah, can you put that next to the FTW cage? Can you get them both on there?
Thank you for that.
So that's a
good comparison, isn't it?
So they're substantially smaller, especially in terms of the space they take up and the width that you can make the blaster as a result. But they do need to be mounted vertically, either with the motors underneath them or with the motors on top, as they are in the Pigeon or as they are in the Nexus, which brings us to the next thing that we've got coming up, which we've had pictures out for a while, and that's the Nexus. That's our new blaster, which is about to be released. It's a grip-fed Talon mag. Mag release is on the back of the grip. If you look at where it sits in my hand, there's been a bit of concern about accidentally pressing that, but it actually sits underneath the heel of your hand. So to press that, you have to move your hand down slightly and press. Even if you try and press it there, you're not going to.
So it requires a conscious effort to drop the mag, but you're not having to move your fingers off the grip.
You're not having to move your fingers off the grip. You just go.
And is that solenoid driven?
It is a free drop. That is solenoid driven, and it is hot swappable shells. So I can pull the shell off now. And so there's the insides of that one.
So you can have different shells in different colorways or dips or however you like, and you can have, for example, if you're playing in a public park, you could have a bright orange shell. If you're playing in a
that's exactly right.
You can have a.
So it's like a fully automatic Nerf smart car.
So I can come down here and I can put on. I've got the wires caught. Hold on. There we go. I can put on a purple shell, or I've got a red and white one, or I can take the red and white one and make it a gear up.
Brilliant. And is there plans for any cosmetic shell alterations with those? Have you got anything that you're going to maybe change the form factor of the outer shell?
Yeah, we're definitely planning that. I've got a couple in the works that I haven't released pictures of widely yet. We've got a rear half that's going to have a shoulder stock as a base. So you can run it as a CQB blaster, looking at extended front ends that'll take a couple of stages.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and from there, anything that you can slide onto the grip over that base grip, you can pretty much do whatever you like above that.
Brilliant. Right, I'm going to go over to Spectre because he's got some stuff that he wants to show us.
Yeah, so I've been asked to speak up, so hopefully this is a little bit louder. One of the things that I wanted to talk about that nobody else has covered yet in this segment is LED work. One of the things that obviously you're using a blaster, you've got a lot of onboard power, you can make them light up, and that's very much in keeping with sort of my aesthetic. Now, earlier on, Monkeytron Collective showed off one of their swordfishes. This is the N7 fish, and this is completely clear, but when you flick this big red switch on the side, the whole thing comes to light.
And that's been a big growth area in the hobby, hasn't it? In the last 18 months, we've seen some really imaginative LED work, and obviously we had things like Alice's Gaven that had disco lighting and could be changed and all of that stuff.
Yeah, the advent of things like the Arduino and pre-programmed LEDs have made LED work even more involved in the hobby. And one of the things that you can do is you can also, just the way that you wire LEDs into your blaster can have an effect on how they behave. So, for example, that one, the LED work and the flywheels are completely independent. So I can turn the lights on and off, or I can have the flywheels operate in the, basically the flywheels can go when it's dark or when it's light. Something like Project Outbreak here. The LEDs are run in series with the motor system, so that when it revs up, the lights come on, and when it revs down, it kind of glows out. That's something that Al, again, this comes back to the community exchange. Al from Monkeytron Collective showed me that particular trick. And then I have my Stampede here, where big switch on the back, LEDs on the front. If there's no lights, nothing works. So it's a master arming switch and a kill switch at the same time as the LED. So that becomes a really obvious, oh, this blaster's ready to fire, or no, it isn't ready to fire. And particularly for the Stampede, when you've taken all of the locks out, you really do want a way of turning off the power, because if you get a jam in the breech, it will burn its motors out really quickly.
Yes, and we've seen some very fun Stampede meltings on the forums over the years from just that. The other thing you can do, I can remind people, is to use an inline fuse. And if you use an inline 20 amp blade fuse, that will also protect you from motor overload on the Stampede, because as soon as the motor stalls, it pops the fuse and then you're back in the game. But you don't then have the option to flick it off, clear it and flick it on. You have to put the fuse back in. So you're then stuck. If you've got a surface mount fuse, you have to pull the fuse and put a new one in, which can get in the way of your game a little bit. And if you're fighting zombies, that's bad. So you're obviously getting into the LED work now a bit more. And I know you do commissions as well. Is there anything that you've done in the last 6 to 12 months that you're particularly proud of? Obviously, we've seen that very first, we've heard about that first recon. Have you got a kind of breakthrough blaster that you were really proud of?
Actually, I think for me, the breakout blaster for me that I'm most proud of is this knockout, because this is my very first brass breach. It's got 3D printed parts, the sort of pull replacement, but inside it's been rebarreled for short darts. So it's got a overlaying airtight brass breech, and this will do 160.
Nice.
Quite happily. Yeah. And this was my sort of first foray into brass breeches. And I'm not really a Springer person. I mostly I own a Caliburn, and that's mostly me. But this is the first time I've actually done a breech on my own. So yeah, that's my breakthrough blaster for 2020.
So Flywheel the World, if people want to get hold of your stuff, have you got distributors around the world? Because obviously you're in a similar position to us, where you've got postage to deal with and things from various corners. Have you got distributors and people that you work with where people can get your stuff? Who does your stuff? If people want to get hold of it.
So we've got our own manufacturing and distribution in Australia and in the US. So for anything Australia or US, it's local shipping to order direct from flywheeltheworld.com. In the US, we've also got flywheels available from Out of Darts and Containment Crew and Frontline Foam. In Europe, the flywheels are available at nerfkrieg.dk and also at blastertime.eu. We've got the solenoids. We're working on how to get those into Europe. The problem is the weight of them. Even shipping them in bulk, they're still pricey to ship. So at the moment, we don't have those in Europe. You'd have to order them from Australia or the US and get them shipped. For the solenoids, they're currently only available on our site, and we've done that because there's just not enough margin there for us to offer resellers a decent price. I know they're substantially more expensive than the cheap, not Amazon, AliExpress, than the cheap AliExpress solenoids. But there's a lot more into the design. Michael Airzone did a video on that just the other week, looking at the differences in strength between the two.
And I think that's a real problem. In one of the things that's annoyed me from a product development standpoint, and I've been quietly involved in product development since the earliest days of the hobby, more as a partner and a kind of backing person than as a direct designer, although I've had input into a few things, is that there seems to be a perception amongst some segments of the market that bargain basement cheapest is best. And obviously you've got quite a premium product. Your Flywheel the World wheels, you develop them yourself. You got them made. You developed your cage designs. You built your product from the ground up. And obviously with the solenoid, I think one of the problems we're seeing with a lot of those cheaper solenoids is really big power draw.
Yeah, ours isn't a baby on power draw either. The nature of a solenoid is it's always going to suck a bit of power because you've got a big coil that you're trying to energize to move a big bit of copper, a big bit of steel. On ours, the core is a lot more substantial than it is on the cheaper ones. So you get a lot more effect for your current draw.
Yeah.
The video Airzone did, he actually puts a cut down recon spring in both solenoids. That's a spring that shouldn't be in any solenoid ever.
Yeah, that's a very strong solenoid spring. For those of you not familiar, the return springs on solenoids are not generally big because obviously the solenoid has to use energy to compress that spring, and it can draw very, very large currents if it's got a very strong return spring. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so our solenoid can compress a retaliator spring. The Chinese ones don't even move.
Yeah, that
They
actually
don't
stalls
even
them out,
get a
doesn't
patch.
it?
It does, yeah.
And anyone who's working with solenoids for the first time, stalling solenoids bad.
Very bad. Very bad. They get very hot very quickly.
Yeah, and obviously you can have big effects on batteries with stalled solenoids too.
That's very true. Now, there was something I was going to say about that, and I've lost it. Sorry. Yeah, the other factor with the solenoid being able to compress a big spring is it means you get a faster fire rate, because a more efficient, stronger solenoid will actually compress in a shorter amount of time, so you can get more darts per second. You're less likely to run into issues, because you can run a heavier spring, you're not going to run into so many issues with the pusher head dragging on the dart, and that's stopping it pulling the solenoid back.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I've not liked about existing solenoid solutions. I haven't built a solenoid full auto, partly because obviously I own a lot of quite nice rapid strike, and we don't have problems with availability of rapid strikes. I know Australia has big rapid strike availability problems, doesn't it?
Rapid strikes, I wouldn't say huge availability problems. You can't get them new on the shelf. There's always lots floating around on the second-hand market still. They're not what I'd call a rare blaster over here yet.
Right. But they're certainly less common than they are in Europe, where you can just pick them up on 2 for 15 quid and sell all the parts.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely less common.
Yeah. So you said that you don't have, obviously, your drag back as it pulls back, because you've got a stronger spring. It's a snappier draw. Is that correct?
It is a snappier draw. So with a 3S system and a double spring, because we do the solenoids in single spring and double, because double you'll get a little bit less battery life, but you can run full auto a little bit faster.
Right.
So with a double spring on 3S, you can comfortably get 12 darts per second all the way down through the charge. And if you're not fussed about changing your battery out when it gets down to around 50%, you can get about 15 darts a second.
Nice. And obviously, if you're running LiPo, you can go down to easily 3.6 volts per cell constant. And if you've got onboard battery monitoring, you can actually go down to the point at which, if you have an alarm, if the alarm starts to beep when you pull the trigger, that's the time to change your pack. And what sort of pack recommendations are you giving for a lot of your stuff? What kind of discharge rates and capacity are you after?
Generally, anything that's sort of around the sort of 35 amp constant would be more than enough. Sorry, I had to do some maths in my head there.
It's okay.
I run a lot of stuff on especially like the Nexus runs on a 500 milliamp volt, which is LAHV, but it's got a 130/65C, so that gives you your 37.5 constant and up to sort of a 65 amp burst, and you're really not going to exceed that. Even in a stall situation, you're not going to exceed that for long enough to damage the battery.
And anybody who doesn't want to go necessarily to Hobby King for those, one of the top spots for those, if you're rest of the world, Vanguard do some GND lipos which are designed for race quads, and those can pull similar. They're straight lipo, but they'll pull 60C out of a 3S 550, and they're very small. In fact, I've got one, I think, probably by my head somewhere. I'll just see if I can see one while I'm doing that. But yeah, those little ones have been a real bonus. Quad racing's really helped us out.
Yeah. It really has.
Because the pack development on those has been really good. Also, if you're in the UK, another place that's worth looking for packs is if you go to unmannedtechshop.co.uk, unmanneduavtech.co.uk. They're kind of like blaster smiths for quads. No, I haven't got one of those handy. I'll get one out later. And now at Spectre. Obviously, you do commission work for people, and you do builds. What platforms are you on if people want to go and look at your work?
So I'm on Facebook. If you search for Team N7 Nerf Adventures, that'll come up for you. I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube, Spectre N7. Pretty much search me on any social media platform. The best way to get in contact with me actually is via my email address, which is n7customs@gmail.com. Had a couple of people reach out to me recently after the world's largest mod party. I've got a Percy's commission on the slate at the moment, which I'm really looking forward to. I've not opened up one of those before, being done in black and gold. So that's going to be really pretty when it's done.
Brilliant. Has anyone got any questions for Flywheel the World? Because I'm just conscious that a lot of people in our community maybe don't see you so much. I know you do other stuff, but certainly the Europeans maybe are only aware of your product and haven't necessarily kind of seen you in person. So if anyone has any questions for Flywheel the World, we've got about 3 minutes. So if you've got a question, get it in the live stream for us so that we can answer questions for Spectre. But he's relatively easy to get a hold of because he's on a lot of our platforms and we do see him often. Do you remember your point that you were trying to get across for FTW?
Yes. The other thing with solenoids is in semi-auto, they're a long way faster in terms of rate of fire than a regular manual pusher semi-auto. You can get almost full auto rates of fire just by tapping the trigger.
Right, and that's a big bonus, really, because obviously the stroke, you eliminate the mechanical stroke error. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with the concept of short stroking, which is what happens when you don't pull the trigger on a strife or a demolisher or far enough, and you only push the dart, and it bogs the wheel, and then you lose the flywheel momentum and you're bogged. So how does your system improve on that?
So basically, I normally run a 2-stage trigger. I run that on pretty much everything. Mainly because when I started, I was working on blasters like the Vulcan and the Stampede, which don't have a rev trigger. So that was how I got around the problem of revving. And when I moved over to blasters with a rev trigger, it was like, ew, this is gross. I just want one trigger. I'm sorry to everyone who does like rev triggers. But yeah, so I've got this set. So a slight tap on the trigger, if you don't mind a bit of rev noise.
Yeah, go.
Just a tiny touch on the trigger. We'll rev it, and then at the other end of the stroke is another switch that when you tap on that activates the solenoid. Now, the instant you tap that, the solenoid strokes all the way through, so there's no partial stroke. So
right, yeah, because the solenoid is triggered by the minute that switch closes, it triggers a full cycle of the solenoid, not a part cycle, because the solenoid will only ever complete a full cycle. When you energize it for a pulse energization, it opens and then the spring slams it shut, and you get a full stroke of the pusher.
And it also means that you don't. Oh, yep, you go.
So actually, that's a question for me. So with the solenoid, if you hit the switch, does it go front back, or does it go out and then you have to release the trigger to bring it back?
No, it goes front back, because once you take your finger off, well, no, you have to release your finger for it to come back, because while it's energized in a basic semi-auto switched build, while it's energized, it'll stay forward. The instant you let that switch off, it'll snap back on the spring. But you don't have to release the trigger all the way. It's not like a normal pusher where if you don't let the trigger off all the way, the pusher doesn't come back far enough to grab the next dart. So if I go, that was a mag in semi-auto.
Nice.
I require this thing in my life.
With that in mind, how much will shipping be approximately to the EU for a Nexus? I think that's probably the question everybody just asked.
I'm going to need to figure that out. I'm going to need to get it boxed up and weighed. Yeah, I can't even give an estimate right now. I'd hate to.
And are you planning
to get it wrong?
Are you planning on licensing the 3D printed stuff and providing an internal kit so that people can get a hold of it, maybe with just a package rather than a bigger package, just the things that they can't get from the licensed distributor?
At this point, I'm not sure on that front. Initially, the Nexus will only be available through Flywheel the World. The files aren't going to be open source for this one. All our other cages and stuff are still going to be open source. But we're just keeping this one in-house. There's a lot of stuff to get it printed right and printed nice that is fiddly, and it's got to be printed just so. I'm not saying we won't look at licensing down the track, but at this point, it's too soon to say.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I think we're pretty much at the end of the segment. So it just means that... and how much does the Nexus weigh, we've been asked, before I get any further?
The heaviest part is the solenoid. The solenoid comes in at around 400 grams. I'd have to put it on the scales, but I'm going to say it probably weighs around 550, 600 grams.
Okay, thank you for that.
As a ballpark.
I'm just conscious that we've got the next segment, and I'm just going to check. I'm waiting for the host there to just tell me how much we've got remaining, or if we're going straight into the next segment, because
he said we can go to 1:15.
Oh right, okay, yes, we've got a bit of overtime, but that's good news.
Do you want me to disappear and chuck a Nexus? Do you want me to disappear and chuck a Nexus on a scale while you plug the raffle?
Yes, please. And then we're just going to talk about the raffle again very briefly, and then I'll go to Spectre. And then while you're getting that weight, that would be really handy because that will help people here work out shipping, because we can go to the same website as you and work it out through your New Zealand postal service, Australian postal service, because we can get quotes.
Don't get New Zealanders and Australians confused. They get very
I know
upset.
they kill you for that. The wildlife's bad enough. Enraged Australians are worse than the wildlife. So we will go and talk about the raffle. Obviously, if you have a donation and you've put a donation into the donate on Just Giving or on what's the other platform that we're using, PayPal, you'll be entered into the raffle. Remember, please, if you're giving money to the raffle and you're entering the raffle, make sure we can identify you. And the pictures of what is available are ticking up now. We're just going to run through those. If you look at some of the prizes, you can see there's some real unique stuff available that you can get. And Just Giving only, and you can pay with card and PayPal as options on Just Giving. So that's currently we're at 1,246, and we're still a bit short of the target that we would like. Jolt might shave his head, and we might get to see some amusing things from Boff. But more importantly, remember what you're giving to. You are giving to the children and young people of Bristol and their families, and you are allowing them to get over some mental health stuff. You're allowing them to have better quality of life. You're allowing them somewhere to go that's safe, where they can go and meet people, obviously, when the restrictions lift. And we're up to 1,426. So there's a typo there. So we're actually further along than we hoped, which is good. But please do keep giving to that worthwhile project. And remember that everything you give on the Just Giving page goes straight to the project. We don't take a cut of any of it. And you're also getting continuing support from the community. And I know the guys in Bristol and the surrounding area are going to be keen to keep supporting that project, and we'll bring you updates. You'll be able to keep up with what the project is doing. And next year, we may even be able to get a little segment on the impact of your giving, because all those projects are all having difficult times at the moment, and those young people will need that project when we reopen. So back to very quickly a few things. We've got some time. So FTW, what was the weight?
We come in at 750 grams without the battery. That's running the new motors as well.
Okay, so that's with your new prototype motor. Now, very quickly, any rough idea when we can expect those FTW motors?
Soon, TM.
Right. So the problem at the moment is that you've obviously had your production schedule disrupted by the virus thing, the same as everyone else has.
Exactly right. So that put us back. That put us back a good couple of months. We wanted to have the motors here. We wanted to have the Nexus released. We're just holding off on release until we've got the motors, because I don't want to ship the first lot of Nexus with honey badgers, and then anybody who waits a couple of weeks gets new motors. So
yeah, and I think that's pretty good.
And as soon as we've got confirmation that everything is on its way, we're going to start taking pre-orders from people who've already expressed interest, and then we'll go from there. Advancement for the Nexus itself, I'm not sure exactly. Someone's asked that as a question. I'm not sure exactly what that means.
So where do you see it going, the Nexus? Is there plans for kind of how it's going to develop, or at the moment you want to get it out there and get it in people's hands and see what the community make of it and where it goes?
I sort of want to get it out there and get it into people's hands. I want to. The whole idea with it is that it's a platform. I'm sorry, I'm going to strip it down again. The whole idea with it is that it's a platform, and you can take that, and basically we can do whatever we want on the top side, and it can be a grip-fed blaster that looks like anything. So
and there's also opportunity there for people to integrate it into shells and custom work.
That's exactly right. Also looking down the track at doing just the core separate from this, probably as a one-piece, with the solenoid and the cage all built in together so that it can be put into anything you want. You could put it into a soft drink can if you want. But going to be a separate project from the Nexus, because the Nexus, that's the other thing I didn't talk about before. The Nexus has been built to tear down completely without tools.
Brilliant.
So if I take this now, give me a second just to get the, down much more. So if I just get the wiring loom out of the way. Sorry, you don't mind me stealing some time here?
No, go.
Yeah, while
So
Adrian's talking about that, just coming back to the raffle quickly. So that people are aware, the raffle tickets are £5 per ticket. So if you donate £10 to the Just Giving page or via our PayPal link, that's 2 tickets. If you donate 20, that's 4, and so on and so on and so forth. Everyone can do basic maths. Now, the more that you donate, the more chances you'll get to win. And obviously, it is going to an amazingly good cause down in Bristol. And I haven't gotten around to donating yet. You have until midnight to donate, and we're all good on that. Once the donations close, there's going to be another draw done tomorrow, so that everybody that donates, so we can give Just Giving time to catch up. So everybody that donates before the midnight cutoff will get the opportunity to be included in the raffle.
Thank you for that, Spectre. So you unplug the wiring loom.
So that's the core of the semi-auto loom. So that does all the transitions between the battery and the switches and the solenoid and the motors. So with the wiring loom out of the way, tear the blaster down. You pull the front cover off, pop the cage out, pop the solenoid out, slide the 2 chassis blocks forwards and back, and then the switches just lift straight out.
See, that is really cool. I like that a lot. And that makes life really easy for replacing coloured parts, changing things out, maintenance. If upgrades come along, then obviously the modular system will allow you to alter parts of the blaster without buying a new one or making a new shell.
That's exactly the idea. So there'll be a plethora, if I may use that word, of parts over time that come out for it. That once you've got the base blaster, you could take it to an apocalyptic LARP one weekend. You could take it to a speed foam game. Take it to an HVZ.
And what sort of power are you getting out of that at the moment with the single set of wheels?
With the single set of wheels, it's sitting at, I haven't cronied it with the new motors yet. I don't have access to a crony right now because someone else in the club's got it and we're all isolated. So
I post mine. That's how it goes. It goes in the mail.
It's a good idea. I might have to try that. So with the honey badgers in there, it was getting 115 to 125 in that sort of spread, so around the 120 average.
So you'd expect it to now hit a 130 average with your motors because they'll be optimized, or maybe a little bit more consistency?
I'd say just a little bit more consistency because the motors won't bog down so much. With full lengths with the new motors, I'd be expecting to see up around the 130 to 140 mark. But with short darts, we're already super critical at that sort of 115 to 120 mark. The short darts don't seem to respond so well to the extra RPM.
Right, yeah, of course you've got less tail on them, so they're not going to get that prolonged contact period where they go.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a common problem. But you're thinking of a second stage maybe to address that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a second stage in the works. It'll involve a slightly longer front shell for the basic shell, and then, as I said, we've got some other shells that we're working on that are noticeably longer for people who desperately want a forward rip or. Yeah,
people like that rifle aesthetic, don't they?
Yeah, and it also means you can take it and you can. If I just give me a second to put the shell back on, even though it's not all back together yet.
Before you do that, can we just see the pusher firing on its own? Somebody just asked in the chat if we can see the pusher firing on its own, just so people can see that snap action from the solenoid. That'd be great.
Sure. In that case, let me wire it up again quickly.
Okay, no worries. And I think a lot of this, we've been waiting for a lot of this stuff, haven't we? I think it's stuff that the hobby's been after. That modularity has really started to come on, hasn't it?
I mean, we got the kind of internal modularity with things like Arduinos, the FDL, controllable voltage, PWM, but this kind of external flexibility, I'm looking at that core and going, I want to put that in a Stampede. I want to put that in a deploy. I want to put that in these things that are normally considered to be uncompetitive blasters, and then wait until I get to the point where people are like, oh, there's a stampede. Nope.
And also, when's the deploy cage coming out? Because I have a deploy that really needs an FTW cage. I want that cage. Oh no, disaster!
He's done it again.
The shelf dive.
I'll let Spectre set. I'll let Spectre set himself back up. I've got to take the cage off so you can see that. So the deploy cage is ready to go as of right now. I've just yesterday finished orienting all the files ready to put up on Thingiverse. I've got to get the listing done for our Facebook, for our website, for the sale page, and then I'll be putting it up. And the long strike is not far behind.
Brilliant. Both of those are very hotly anticipated. I have both. And Spectre is ready as always and itching to deploy his deploy. And the button still works.
So here we go, solenoid.
Yep. That is really nice.
If you'll permit me to, I won't be able to shoot this as fast because I'm holding it on a really weird angle. But that mag's decided to jam on me. Of course it has. I can't do anything about that solenoid or not. Hang on, if I squeeze it that way, it looks like it's going to work.
Yeah, and that solenoid's working beautifully, isn't it?
Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
And what's your standard battery connector in that system?
I'm switching over pretty much everything I do from here on to XT30s. I have been using 60s, and I did a bunch of research on the 30s, and they're good for more than well over what we use in the hobby, even in a stall situation.
Yeah, I've pulled 100 amps through an XT30.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. The XT60s are just so far overkill for anything we do, and for the size of the XT30 by comparison. Hang on, give me a sec.
Well, here's an example of XT30. This is a common use for XT30. Those of you who might be familiar with race quads, these are around 18 amps stall each, and there are 4 of them through that XT30 is the main battery connector. That doesn't get warm usually. The thing to watch out for though with XT30 is don't buy the cheap clone nasty ones. Some of them are really, really bad.
Yep. Just to give an idea, XT60 in my right hand, XT30 in my left hand.
Wow,
so that gives you an idea.
Like almost a quarter of the size.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason that we standardized, obviously Britner was one of the first organizations to standardize its wiring, and the forum has had a standard wiring scheme and a standard connector scheme for a long time. And the XT60 was picked because it was big and robust and easy to solder. So we're just going to wrap up. Has anyone got any final things they want to talk about? Just very quickly, and say thanks to anybody or anything like that. 30 seconds.
Welcome to Foam Fest Live. It's great to be here. I'm sorry we can't be in the real place with everybody, but this is the next best thing. Thank you to the organisers for helping put this all together.
And FTW might just be dialing back in. If he's not, then yep. Anything you want to say very quickly?
Am I back in? I don't know what happened.
Yeah, you are. Go if you want to say something. Say something.
No, just I don't know. You put me on the spot now. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for
our
coming
stuff and yeah.
And we're going to keep supporting you. Thank you very much for showing up.
No worries. Happy to be here.
It's time for another commercial break, people, and then we'll be right back. And we are here with Rainbow Owl after the break.